So in our...
You can ask as many as you want.
I've just got one final one. But in our school curriculums, there's a lot of talk about a Bill of Rights, and we in Australia obviously don't have one, whereas in the States they do. How do you think, or how does a Bill of Rights protect the rights of people, and do you think that it is effective?
So I think it's effective because it's the only system I know. Our founders had a great debate about this, right? The founders of the country, the founding fathers that everyone's familiar with, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, John Jay, although less so, those two, did not want a Bill of Rights. And the reason they didn't want a Bill of Rights is they felt like by listing certain rights, you assumed that the American people would have no other rights other than those listed. And that's always the danger of the Bill of Rights, right? And Justice Thomas, if you read McDonald, it's a case in there about blacks and gun rights, and it's all people's gun rights, and I know that's a foreign concept in a lot of countries, but he talks about how blacks were disenfranchised through taking away their guns and things. And he talks about the privileges or immunities clause, and that clause incorporates certain God-given rights that we've always had. They're not listed. The right to raise your children, right? That's a right, it's in the book. Justice Thomas talks about that in one of the chapters. I think people will find that fascinating. And so this debate is an interesting one. And I don't know Australian society as well to judge, but what I would say is you're either proving or disproving that our founders were right, right? So the reason we got a Bill of Rights, it's 2 years after the Constitution was passed, is the anti-federalists, the people on the other side, demanded it because they were so afraid of a federal government trampling our rights and becoming big. Well, you know, the federal government has grown, and that's chapter 4 in the book. It talks about the Interstate Commerce Clause and how that's developed. And so it's kind of be careful what you wish for sometimes. Yes, it can be a great thing, our Bill of Rights. I wouldn't want a country that didn't have our Bill of Rights. At the same time, that's not what protects the American people. Justice Scalia always said this. North Korea and Russia have a longer, and as many would argue, better Bill of Rights than us. But again, they're not governed by the rule of law. They're governed by dictatorial men.
Yeah.
And what we have is the separation of powers. And that's what makes America unique. It's what makes Australia unique, right? Is these countries that truly value the separation of powers. Because the checks and balances is what in many ways protects the ordinary citizen. So it's a really hard question. There's not a perfect answer because I know our history and I know what the founders were, and we never tested that out because we immediately passed the Bill of Rights.
There you go. Well, I guess Australia then is a good test subject perhaps between the comparison. We both have the rule of law, one with the Bill of Rights and one without. Well, if you don't have any other questions, Chris?
No, that's it.
No? Well, thank you very much for speaking with us today. We really appreciate it.
It's been great.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.